Voters came out early in the Ethiopian capital Addis Ababa. Long queues began forming before the 6 a.m. opening time, with people keen to make their voices heard.
This election allows the people to exercise their right to choose without any external pressure. It's a good thing for both the public and the country.
To determine the social and economic destiny of our country in the future, since we are now at a very critical time. To do my part at least. This is why I came this morning.
Ethiopians are choosing more than 500 members of the House of Representatives. Those elected will then select the Prime Minister. But only some 50 million people of Ethiopia's estimated population of 130 million are registered to vote. Tensions are high in a landlocked country. No election is taking place in the northern war-torn region of Tigray, and there is only limited voting in the Oromia and Amhara regions, where the government faces ongoing insurgencies. The ruling Prosperity Party is expected to secure a majority of seats in parliament, meaning incumbent Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed is almost certain to stay in his job. After casting his ballot, Ahmed accused opposition forces of trying to undermine public confidence in the election.
To prevent the election from being peaceful as planned, Ethiopia's historical enemies have bought and deployed the forces they control and have carried out propaganda. They have tried to make us believe that democratic elections are not possible in Ethiopia.
Opposition parties have raised concerns over the vote, alleging they were prevented from actively campaigning.
Let's bring in Martin Plaut here. He's a senior researcher at King's College London, specializing in conflicts in Africa, particularly the Horn of Africa. Welcome, Martin. What impact is this election in Ethiopia likely to have on tensions in the region?
Well, in a sense, the way to look at this election is not so much as an election which will actually decide who is going to be the prime minister or the government, because we're pretty sure that we know who that's going to be. There's going to be no change. But what it could do is to allow Prime Minister Abiy to go ahead with some of his more dramatic plans for the Horn of Africa, which both have been to suggest having a base in Somaliland and possibly even taking parts of the ports of Assab and Massawa in Eritrea. So those are the things that might go ahead. It would also allow him to continue his relationship with some of the militant groups in Sudan.
So we're likely to see continuity in terms of the government and perhaps feeling emboldened to carry out bigger projects. Has there been any effective opposition in this election?
Not really, because, you know, the Prime Minister doesn't allow opposition. I mean, a number of parties have been banned from participating. In other areas, there are conflicts, like in Tigray, in the Amhara region and parts of Oromia. There really aren't elections going on outside of the cities. Some of the rebel groups are responsible for this, saying that they won't allow people to travel. But, you know, really, the whole process of this election has been to restrict the democratic space, either by reducing the media ability to report on it or preventing parties from participating. So this is really just a token gesture.
What do opinion polls in Ethiopia say about voter satisfaction with the current government, Martin? Is there any reliable data?
Not really, but I mean, I think in the urban areas he can be quite popular. In the rural areas, he certainly isn't, because, you know, people are left without a great deal of food. There have been problems. There have been continuing conflict throughout the country, and that has really undermined his popularity outside of the cities. But amongst the elite, they say, well, they have beautiful new roads. They have nice gleaming buildings that are being built, particularly in Addis Ababa. And unless you're some of the poor who have been forced to leave their homes and their businesses to build those new skyscrapers, well, you know, you think things are going fine. But if you're poor, it's not so good.
Human rights groups have voiced great concern about this election. How extensive, how serious are the violations being reported?
Well, they have been serious. You know, if you don't allow people to go to the polls and you prevent them from participating and you hold out the threat that once these elections are over, there could be conflict with Eritrea, there could be conflict, continuing conflict in Sudan, and, then the situation is very tense indeed. And people just don't know what to expect once this is over. And I think this is going to be a really important moment because it gives Prime Minister Abiy the legitimacy that he requires without constraining him in any way.
So you mentioned these tensions. It's a mixed picture in terms of voters' satisfaction with the government, you say. Is the country bracing for possible violence when the results are announced?
I think the violence is likely to come sometime after the election, because if Prime Minister Abiy has already mobilized troops, sent them up to the Tigray region in the past, he may get them involved in a war with Eritrea. That is very worrying. People are deeply concerned about that, both in Eritrea and in Ethiopia. It's only been outside powers who've been able to prevent him from doing this. He's also allowed the UAE to put military equipment into Western Ethiopia, which is going to support the groups in the Sudan who are fighting the Sudanese government. And that has also made the situation much worse. So it is a very insecure situation and one that people are worried about. But as I say, the election itself may not be the spark to produce the violence. It is what it allows to happen after the election that could really be worrying.
Martin, thank you very much for your insights. That was Martin Plaut, senior researcher at King's College London.
Well, I'm joined now by Tsedale Lemma. She is the founder of Addis Standard, one of Ethiopia's leading independent news outlets. She's also a journalist who has chronicled the wars in Ethiopia as well as the shrinking political space under the current prime minister. Ms. Lemma, it's good to have you with us. We heard there in that report that the prime minister's victory, it appears virtually assured. So what is this election? Is it a meaningful act of democracy, or are we just seeing some type of public rubber stamping for the prime minister's power?
Hi, Brent. Thanks for having me. I'm afraid it's the latter, but it's even more troubling because this is an election that the ruling party is seeking, so to say, an impeded public mandate to be able to proceed with the political project that the prime minister personally ambitions to see in Ethiopia. So this is more of like an attempt to garner legitimacy domestically and also internationally, whereas there are no fair ground for the opposition and there is not meaningful involvement by any of the opposition parties in the country, not to mention the conflicts that are happening in many parts of the country.
Let me, you use the word legitimacy. How can this election have legitimacy? We know that in places like Tigray, voting did not take place.
Yes, Brent, and it's worth mentioning that this is the second time Tigray regional state is being entirely excluded from a national election. So whereas the ruling party seeks for legitimacy, in reality, in fact, this is yet another election that could further tear the federation apart as we know it. It has done so much damage in the last election, 2021, because it took place in the middle of a very devastating war in the Tigray region, which later on moved to Amhara region and also Afar regions. But it was also very much exclusionary of the rest of the opposition from the center itself, who have boycotted particularly opposition parties in the Oromia, the largest regional state. So this is by far not an election that would give the ruling party the legitimacy, but the ruling party would like to believe that this is an election that would yet again give it the mandate to continue with the political projects that has not produced any cohesion in the country or in the state itself.
I want to ask you, too, before our time runs out, the wider conflict around the Red Sea and the Middle East is certainly raising the stakes for this election. Could Ethiopia's internal crisis, could it become part of a much larger regional confrontation?
It could in two ways. Number one, I think the ruling party, given how the Ethiopian people are positioned to believe that Ethiopia has a historical right to have a sovereign access to the Red Sea, and that given the numbers that are being produced as registered voters, for example, which has seen a 40% increase from the last number of registered voters, I believe the ruling party will be emboldened now to feel like it has the mandate to pursue its ambition of a sovereign access to the Red Sea. And that would further increase the tensions in the Horn of Africa. It would also increase tensions internally because the election has not been agreed upon by different parts, the rebel groups in Amhara region and in Oromia region do not believe that this is a legitimate election. So it will further polarize the internal political dynamics. So both internally and externally, I believe this election will add more tensions going forward.
I've got 30 seconds. We've got to be brief here. What about intimidation and free reporting of this election? What have you and your colleagues, what have you seen?
Well, to start with, the opposition did not campaign outside of the capital. In fact, they didn't even campaign inside the capital, except for the opposition that are friendly to the ruling party. The real opposition did not have any chance whatsoever to go and meet their constituencies outside of the capital and also inside the capital. When it comes to the media, Addis Standard magazine that I founded was systematically excluded from reporting on this because the Ethiopian Media Authority revoked its registration, and then the electoral board said, once your registration is revoked, we don't give you the badges that we have applied for 10 journalists. So there has been a lot of intimidation against independent media.
Unfortunately, we're out of time, but we appreciate you taking the time to talk with us and allowing us also to get this story out to the world. Thank you.
Thanks for having me, Brent.